This week's videos are sponsored by Prize Picks, the easy-to-use fantasy sports betting app. More on them in just a bit.
Ladies and gentlemen, we just got out of watching Joker. We're here at AMC right now. So it was a little nerve-wracking shooting these. Are they going to kick us out or something? Anyway, let's give it a shot.
The AMC police are here any moment.
While you're here, please go ahead and leave a like on this video. Joker 2 is a movie that is a response to the first film, Aftermath of Joker Part 1, that involves Arthur Fleck falling in love with Harley Quinn. Is also a courtroom drama about should Arthur Fleck be put to the death. And it's a musical at the same time. I think we can just give our short opinions and then maybe we can start getting a little bit more specific. So if you just want like the short bite-sized cut, here it is. I think this movie is a fluctuating experience from interesting to frustrating, kind of nonstop. I found myself like getting genuinely frustrated at times with the way the movie was actually being paced and executed and choices they were making. At first, the musical element wasn't bad to me. Like, I understand the purpose of it. It's like the movie saying we're going to go into Arthur Fleck's mind. We're going to explore the fantasy that's in his mind.
There's a little bit sprinkled in there about, you know, the use of music to help, you know, harmonize your soul and help you rise above your struggles and things like that.
Yeah, and I thought it was an interesting film of, wow, Todd Phillips really seems like he has something to say about the way people reacted to the first movie. There was like a commentary on sensationalism, a lot of commentary that is repetitive from the first movie as well, which I sort of feel like is kind of the point with the way how the movie ultimately concludes. However, the journey getting there and sometimes doesn't feel like you're getting from the movie, it feels like you're getting through the movie.
Hey, that's a way to phrase that, yeah.
The first like half hour or so, I was like, I don't know what people were talking about, this is fine. Then after a while, I was like, okay, I'm starting to get what people are talking about. In my summarization for my short opinion, I feel like there's a solid 40 minutes in this movie that's really good. I felt like, oh, this could have been one of those sequels that they did like 10 years from now where like Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix got together, like, let's just do a 40-minute short film, like a 40-minute epilogue to
Yeah,
Joker.
totally.
But then a lot of it kind of just feels like drawn out and padded out. I don't know, it also feels like there's kind of a disdain for the first movie.
Which in some ways I think is interesting, certainly.
Yes.
I mean, the first Joker movie for me, one of my less enjoyed aspects was that it was so writ large. It was so beating you over the head with the fact that like no one is good in Gotham except for poor Arthur and maybe one other person. Whereas this movie at least bothers to be a little bit more nuanced in how it goes about communicating the question of sanity and these narratives that we tell ourselves and sensationalism, fascination with crime and the, you know, nihilistic sides of reality and existence and all that stuff. I can see it attempting to make a more nuanced comment on all that stuff, and I appreciate them doing that. But yeah, as a movie experience, it doesn't feel quite as focused, which is fine. They're both Rorschach tests in terms of like what they're doing. They're not prescribing you a message so much, and I like that kind of movie-going experience. I don't need it to tell me what to think, but I do feel like the second movie is more meandering, and there are constantly times where I kept hoping they would go one level deeper on so many choices they would make, most specifically the music aspect, because what that amounts to oftentimes is you're just watching people sing at kind of a quiet voice, which is interesting in and of itself.
Did they do it in camera? It seems like that's what they were doing, because there's not much style to, there's like no style to the way it's done.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
And then it felt like for the most part, it was mainly in camera.
Yeah.
Which would have weird mixing sometimes where like the music is very overpowering the vocals.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a kind of hybrid mishmash of the two. And again, like there are aspects of that I appreciate. However, as a fan of musicals, certainly, and as somebody who was looking forward to that as a device to further personify and explore,
could have been great.
The psychology and the insanity on display, I felt like they kind of dropped the ball on that. I don't mind them naturalistically and intimately portraying the music, but at the same time, once you get a certain way into the movie, you are like, they're just kind of covering this like you would a normal scene. And like, yeah, there are a lot of great shots, but the music is kind of left to do all the heavy lifting, and the movie magic part of the musical elements isn't really that engaging.
And especially for a movie that keeps talking about surrender to fantasy or face reality, I felt like they could have committed to the fantasy.
Yeah, with the musical stuff especially, like fly walls of the set out, get an ensemble in here, really go expressionist with it.
And
you know?
structurally wise, I really felt like a lot of the time the movie became predictable at a certain point where I was like, oh, I'm getting into the scene. a musical number's about to happen, isn't it? It's going to ruin the momentum, isn't it? Nearly every single time. Because at first when the musical number thing was happening, especially in the first half, I thought it was fine. I actually was like, yeah, I don't get what the complaint. It's interesting, and as you're going into the mind of Arthur Fleck, I'm understanding the intention. It does really actually affect the rhythm of the film, and oftentimes undercuts the scene that it's in, and sometimes it does feel like, what is the point of this? Why do we don't need this scene right now? We don't need it. Yeah.
And I feel like
sometimes they're well justified. Other times they're like, I don't think we don't need this.
Yeah, and I think if they really were 100% in camera with some of this stuff, it might read a little bit better. But two, the performances across the board in this movie I think are pretty terrific, but as, again, a vehicle of sorts for Lady Gaga and something that really pitches itself like, oh, this is going to be these two iconic characters, you know, meeting in this Elseworld that is this unique take. The movie should feel like a duet, and it feels more like an Arthur Fleck song that happens to have like a featured verse from Lady Gaga instead of like a full-on duet between these two characters. Like, as prominent as Harley is in the movie, she's not actually as engaged to like the core of it, I felt, as I would have hoped, maybe.
Some of the best scenes in this movie are when it is just Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga talking to each other. Oftentimes, those are actually the most effective scenes. Lady Gaga eventually does feel like she gets relegated to she's just gonna be a singer in this movie, but there's plenty of scenes still. The way how some people kind of made the movie sound was that she's not really in it, but I'm like, she's kind of in it a lot. It's just the usage of Harley Quinn eventually just becomes like she's just in Arthur's fantasy primarily at a certain point singing.
She's
so
definitely
Lady Gaga singing.
She's definitely in it. I wouldn't say, she's like not in the movie or hardly at all. But yeah, I feel like there's more they could have done to really embrace the breadth of her talent.
Reject Nation, I never really consider myself a sports guy. I know so many people who are into sports, so many people who watch this channel are into sports. My wife, into sports. Sometimes it feels emasculating while she yells at the TV and I don't know what's going on. Why that feels emasculating? That's more to do with me than her, that's for sure. But anyway, the peer pressure got me to find a way to find fun with sports. And if you're looking for a fun and simple way to get into daily fantasy sports, let me introduce you to Prize Picks. It's America's #1 daily fantasy app with over 5 million active members. And honestly, it's the only one I've ever used, but from everyone who I know who has used fantasy sports thingies before says this is the easiest one they've ever used, my wife included, and the missus is never wrong. All you do is pick more or less on player stat projections, like how many yards your favorite QB, that stands for quarterback, by the way, will throw, or how many points a star player will score. You can pick between 2 and 6 players, and if you get them right, you win. Even I can comprehend this, and I'm not the smartest guy. And like I said, it's easy to get started, and it's easy to use. A lot of emphasis on the easy. Here's one easy example. So at the time of recording this, we just bet on Jordan Love, Jaden Reed, and Joe Burrow. Consulted with John. John knows more about sports than me, so really this was his decision. So let's see if he tanked this whole operation, or if we're filthy rich now. Great thing, if one of your players ever gets injured, Prize Picks has an injury insurance policy. I could use some health insurance in my own life. So your lineups stay in play. Rhymes, bars, baby. And if you miss one pick, you can still cash out thanks to their unique flex play option. It's available in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. You can download the Prize Picks app today. Use code REJECTS and get $50 instantly when you play just $5. There's a lot of fives in this shout out. $5, $50, 5 million members. It's like the number 23. But anyway, you don't even have to win to get the bonus. Isn't that awesome? Prize Picks. Run your game. Get into daily fantasy sports like this expert over here.
Like Joaquin Phoenix, as always, is very committed, and he does a great job. And his arc in the film, a lot of it feels like, it's weird. It says like the landing point is different than what they did in the first movie, but a lot of the journey throughout feels very similar to the first movie. So a lot of the time I did find myself going like, what was the point of this? and why is it immediately starting off right? Like when you see how the first movie ends, this movie starts off with like Arthur Fleck's like immediately back to who he was before he was Joker.
Yeah.
And then it's about him becoming Joker again. and
but
I
just
guess
in a different environment.
Yeah, just in like a different way. And I guess it kind of it makes sense though, because like, yeah, he's been beaten down in Arkham and stuff. But I was like, I feel like there's a more interesting movie if they kind of just picked it up where Arthur left off at.
Yeah, like aspects of that are there, and the whole debate about like, I think it's, you know, for again, my complaint partly about the first movie is like, if you take the Batman context out, it kind of falls apart a little bit. it. And this, I thought they made interesting use of Batman-esque themes of like who is the real guy and who's the character, and also, you know, Joker just as an inverse to just like all of societal order. Like, that's all interesting. But yeah, like in terms of actually diving in and really making that debate and the, you know, fantasy versus reality like super engaged, it feels just like one of many little seasonings that they put on it throughout the movie. And the rest of it is you're just kind of watching these hypnotic montage bits of him walking through this place or being tormented by guards. And yeah, it's an odd kind of play on the first movie while trying to do some new things and winding up, I don't know, less propulsive in the process. Like, the first movie has way more dynamic and way more of a build of tension and release finally than this does really at all.
There's kind of this big thing that happens in the finale. It's like, it's a big thing that happens in the finale. And I just went, sure. Like,
why not?
It's just like, well, that was my response to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I guess we'll go there.
Yeah.
Why not? Let's go there. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Like, this big shift that happens.
Yeah.
And I wasn't. I was like, okay, maybe they're gonna make up for a lot of the parts that were tedious to get through with this finale. But there's parts about the way this movie ends that I totally see how are gonna be frustrating. There's little like kind of adorable Easter eggs. I think they do. It's one of those things where you're like, cute.
Yeah.
Of certain definite like things that go down that are very much like for the audience. But I think like the very ending of this movie is certainly going to be something that I feel like I feel like this movie is going to be way more negative with audiences overall. Not because of what the movie's saying, even though I do feel like a lot of it is being like, a lot of you guys took away the wrong message from the first movie.
Who am I empowering?
Yeah. But I think it's the execution of the movie. Like, the execution of the movie is just nowhere near as enjoyable. I like the first Joker movie. I like the first third of Joker and then the last third of Joker a lot. The middle portion, it's a real mixed bag for me. But I really like the first Joker movie. This
Very
one,
striking, the first movie.
This one is like, I don't know. I found myself like from interested to frustrated, and then at the same time like dispassionate by the end. Like, it's not like a Last Jedi situation or something.
Sure.
I'm just like, I don't think they needed. This is really one of those sequels where I'm like, I really don't think they needed to make this, and I don't really feel like he had something strong to say with this film.
I feel like the potential was all. I kind of
the potential
agree.
was all there.
The potential was all there. I like everything they tried to do, and just to get it all out of the way here, you know, like the cinematography is beautiful. All the performances are great. You know, there's some really great music. There's some really great staging here and there. But yeah,
Brendan Gleeson's awesome.
Brendan Gleeson is great.
Brendan Gleeson has a very effective mean guard.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like I said, there are aspects.
Those courtroom drama scenes. Some of it really, like, there's a couple of really good courtroom scenes. There's a couple of really good ones.
One of my favorite scenes in the movie is in that a scene that made me cry.
A scene
in the courtroom.
There's a scene that made me go, "Oh, this feels like Joker."
Yes.
Like, not Todd Phillips' Joker, like which is just Arthur Fleck, a sad dude. This feels like Joker.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of the courtroom drama that is a half-hearted attempt at reflection, and it mainly just feels like recap of the first one. Like, I see what they were aiming for with looking back at the first movie, because a lot of this is reflection upon that first movie's journey. But I think the writing of how it went down and the overall execution was just like, oh my God, do something new. I found myself, that's when I was getting, that's especially when I would get frustrated, just do something new.
The prologue of the movie, I think, is kind of a good metaphor for the movie in general, because the prologue starts off with a choice. I'm not going to spoil for you.
With a shadow.
But I really like the choice.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there watching it going, I'm so glad that they did this, and yet I wish that they had added just another layer of flavor on top of this, another layer of knowing sort of homage to what they're doing here. And I feel like so many things throughout this movie, I'm like, if you had just focused up a little bit more and gone a level deeper on some of these themes or some of these, you know, more out there sequences, like, then you would have had something that's just as striking and rousing as the first movie, rather than kind of going back to this miserable world and, you know, kind of strolling through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can honestly just wait for it on streaming. I'm not going to say don't watch it. I don't feel like we watched this on IMAX, and I don't feel like the theater
Looks beautiful.
Yeah, but I don't know. I kind of still feel like the first one looked better. There was something more visually striking.
It's got way more rhythm in the editing, I would say. Like there are a lot of really beautiful shots back to back to back, but it all kind of becomes this sea of like, I need the momentum of the actual pace of the movie to pick up some dynamics. Otherwise, a lot of it is for naught.
And I was telling John this actually on the car ride over, of just from what I was hearing from other people's opinions, and I think it stands true with watching this movie, is that Todd Phillips very much in the first movie is riffing on Taxi Driver and King of Comedy as almost a template for that film.
What?
Whereas this movie, I feel like he could have used a template. And that template I felt was a good guide for him in that first one. Where here this feels like some of the words I'm saying, I'm like, actually, this sounds like a movie I would be down for. That's the weird thing, is because a lot of the intention, where it feels a little bit more stream of consciousness. It feels a little bit more like I have ideas. But I think it definitely needed another solid draft before they actually proceeded.
And hey, maybe in the spirit of the first film, maybe a couple movies that are very distinctly guiding the aesthetic of what this is, you know. And hey, people know Taxi Driver and have come to discover King of Comedy due to this. You could have gone back for, some classic musical or some classic courtroom movie. And there are little moments that make you think of stuff like Inherit the Wind or whatever it might be. And you get the sense that Todd Phillips is like a cinephile and a classic film fan as well as a modern filmmaker. You wish that would shine through in a movie that focuses that much more heavily on narrative and musicality and theatricality and all that stuff.
I don't think the musical thing was an interesting idea. I feel like they should have gone with a different choice in the end instead of doing the musical bit.
Just go further.
Yeah, I don't think the musical element worked out that well in this particular film. Good performances, but overall, it's not my favorite movie.
Not a fan. I'll chew on it and probably be thinking about it, which I would prefer to forgetting this immediately. But it's
a weird thing.
It's kind of frustrating.
I'm like at a 45% with this movie, but I would say I really like that 45. That's the thing. Is that
there's some really good stuff in there.
There's a lot about this that I really did not just enjoy sitting through, but but the parts I did like, I really did like. But it's a messy film. But what do you guys think? Did you like it? Should they make a third?
Yes, definitely make a third.
Leave your thoughts down below, and we'll talk with you guys soon.